Great. Thank you for sharing. Now, we've said this already, but I'd like to say it again. Justice, as explained by the theory of social exchange, is a truth of human nature that is in everyone, but not necessarily obvious to us. The central message of social exchange is that the force that holds two parties together in a relationship is the value that passes between them. Specifically, social exchange claims that you give with an expectation of receiving and receive with an obligation to return the favor. Sometimes this is called the norm of reciprocity. What is given and received does not have to be in the same form. For example, one could give money to another in return for time the receiver may spend with the giver. A wealthy person may give money to a charity in return for a building named after them. Sociologists have found by studying primitive tribes that this is behavior that is not learned but instinctive. It is buried deep within our human condition, and it governs all types of relationships. It's as human as needing air to breathe and water to drink. So, without even being aware, social exchange is a powerful influence on what we decide to do as we go through life, especially as our behavior is selected to bring more satisfaction, as we discussed earlier in the course. For example, you have heard the platitude of the proverb, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Right? Some might say it's more blessed to give than to receive. Blessed or blessed refers to joy. So the saying represents a truth that giving offers more joy than receiving. Now, if being happy occurs when my circumstances benefit me, we would view this truth as a promise that we will be happier when we give to others. However, giving may make us feel better, relieve deep-seated guilt, or in some cases, giving can be seen as a way to have others give back to us. Think about that. The social exchange influence built into our nature is really telling us giving is the best way to get something we need. So while giving may seem to make us more virtuous, the exchange force in our nature can sometimes create a hidden reality that giving is a self-serving way to meet our own needs. Often, social exchange is the theory of why people stay together in relationships. Social exchange is present in our marriage and in our work. When someone says marriage is a 50-50 relationship, they are saying that marriage works as an exchange equilibrium. And even if we want to be virtuous and say marriage is a 90-10 relationship, when the balance of exchange gets to a point that one is giving more than they are receiving, then the relationship dissolves or the parties remain for reasons other than exchange, such as moral duty or coercion from someone in power. We'll look at these types of exchanges in a minute. The key point is this. The exchange must satisfy each party's expectations. Social exchange is a powerful bias on how we choose to respond to events in our lives. Often, we are not even aware of this influence. As we mentioned in explaining social exchange, the exchange can take one of many different forms. One is the law. The phrase, liberty in law, may at first glance seem contradictory. However, members of a community maintain freedom in exchange for following the law as set forth by the community. Social scientists have found that built into human nature is the drive of people to give in order to get. This is called by the Latin phrase quid pro quo, which means something for something. Much charity is behavior that appears virtuous, but it is influenced in the person's soul by the expectation that they will receive something for what they are giving, such as praise, honor, or a favorable act by someone who can help them. Maybe even a person who gives is receiving relief from guilt or shame, or just likes feeling good about what they do. Exchange. Recently, psychologists from Yale University, you've heard of it? They studied monkeys on a secluded island where civilization had never touched. They found that the monkeys easily learned to trade what they called monkey coins for grapes with the scientists. They also saw social exchange exhibited in the interactions the monkeys had with each other, very similar to humans. Their conclusion was that monkeys have characteristics that humans exhibit. This suggests that social exchange is also very basic, even in the core nature of animals. There's more to exchange than just giving to get. What do most people do when they receive a gift? Well, let's be honest. They feel guilt or shame, which often motivates them to do something in return, like return with another gift, or at least send a thank you note. It just seems like the right thing to do. But is it virtue? Or is it just in our human nature to be motivated to give back to someone when we receive? We want to feel balanced. Obligation and duty are powerful and instinctive influences on us to keep the exchange in balance. Morality is a specific form of exchange. The moral code of a community reflects the virtues that everyone must exhibit, so individuals of a community are viewed as good, which is how people receive acceptance by the members of the community. We have mentioned culture before as a critical part of our worldview. We discussed earlier how culture affects how we see things. It does this through shared values that end up biasing and filtering what we actually see in situations. The other key component of culture is called cultural norms. Norms are behaviors that everyone expects in given circumstances. Being seen as legitimate in a community is one of the most powerful forces in human decision-making. So, when we try to follow the norms, this results in us doing things that others in our community expect of us. Norms differ from law and morality in that norms are only relevant and important in a particular situation. Norms are not formal rules or laws, nor are they the community's predefined code of virtue or conduct or morality. Now, for example, let's talk about some norms. Celebrations for holidays, weddings, funerals. These are cultural norms. How people greet each other, especially elders and authorities, are types of cultural norms. Norms give community identity, order, and predictability. And this is to help illustrate that when we talk about influences that impact the behavior we select in any given situation, we can see that our need to conform to cultural norms is a powerful influence, and one we rarely recognize is happening. And since social exchange is built into human nature, you may ask this question: is it possible for anyone to ever choose a behavior that is not influenced by exchange? Now that would be a good question. And in our discussion of types of community, we claim that types 1 and 2 were exchange-based, and type 3 was not. We describe type 3 community as one where those in power treat people with unmerited favor or undeserved kindness because of their character of love and generosity. This poses an interesting question. Are we then saying that a type 3 community is inhuman? Now that is also a good question for you to consider during this course. Throughout the ages, people have pondered this question. Someone who believed that type 3 communities are possible once told a story of a father whose relationship with his sons was not based on exchange. However, while the father was not influenced by exchange, his sons sure were. And because his sons were influenced by their human nature, they selected behavior based on exchange and failed to get the full benefits of their father's unmerited love. The story goes like this. A wealthy father had 2 sons. Now, the oldest son did everything the father asked him to do, but the younger son was restless and rebellious. And one day, the youngest son could not wait any longer for his inheritance. So he asked his father to give him his part of the estate. Surprisingly, in our story, his father agreed. He sold half of all of his business interests and gave it all to his youngest son. So his son had all the money. What did the son do with it? He went off to another city and spent it all. Spent his entire inheritance. The older son, well, he remained at home during all this time. He stuck to his duty as a good son. So here's the younger son. He's run out of money. He spent it all. Wasted it. He found himself broke, homeless, lost all his friends, wasn't able to buy food even. So eventually, the younger son decides that even though he could never again be treated like a son by his father because he had betrayed him and left everything, he had been very disrespectful, squandered his part of the family wealth. That he'd be better off if he just went back home and got hired as an employee of his father in his dad's business. So that's what he did. Purposed in his heart, went back to dad. Now, when his father saw him coming from the distance, his father was filled with compassion on his younger son, and he ran out to meet him. And the son started his rehearsed saying. He said, "Father, I don't deserve a second chance." But his father wouldn't hear a word of it. He interrupted him, he hugged him, and he welcomed him home. His father then threw a big party to celebrate his son's return and gave him expensive gifts. And regardless of what his son had done, the father was so excited to have him back home. Well, you can imagine what the oldest son felt. He'd been working at the office, been faithful to his duty in one of his father's businesses. And then someone comes along and tells him about his brother's return. So when he got home, he found out that his dad was throwing this big party for his younger brother, the one that betrayed his dad. So he became very angry, would not join the party. His father pled with the older son to come in. The oldest son replied, "I've obeyed you. I've done everything you expected of me, and you never threw a party like this for me." And the father replied to his eldest son, "Now, you've always been with me. You've had access to everything I have. But your brother, the younger son, he's been estranged from me. He's now come back home, and this is worth celebrating." This story has some interesting and important insights. But before we get into the major point of this story, and what the storyteller wants us to understand, let me ask you this.